My neighbor Charles broke heartbreaking news to us 5 years ago that his 14-year-old son had gone missing. The entire neighborhood felt terrible after he reported it to the police, and it became national news. When my wife and I were at a loss for words, we offered to assist in any way we could. We thought that as time passed, they had accepted the worst-case scenario. We never found the guts to inquire as to whether their son's body was ever located. It felt off, to put it simply. Charles and his wife, Kathy, changed a lot after that. Kathy became really quiet, and Charles always seemed nervous and on edge. It was hard to watch them go through that. Something unexpected happened last week. While I was bringing out the trash, Charles stopped by and asked if he could get a shovel. I gave it to him right quickly because I didn't give it much thought at the moment. He promised to return it the next day, saying he had to work in his backyard. Afterwards, when I was inside, I noticed Charles digging a massive hole in his yard through my window. Being in his mid-52s, he is not a youthful man, thus it appeared that he was having some difficulties. I figured I could be of assistance, so I picked up another shovel and went to help him. But he appeared shocked, almost scared, when I shouted out to him. Running over, he asked me to go and told me not to help. It was unusual for him to be so firm and nearly furious. I just walked away without saying anything because I didn't push it. I continued to observe him outside my window since I couldn't understand how he behaved. He continued to dig for some time after that, keeping an eye out to see if anyone was nearby. I tried to appear like nothing happened as I quickly walked away when he caught me staring out of my window. I was unable to sleep that evening. I heard the sound of a shovel again at about 1:30 a.m. It was Charles. I knew that. I crept outside in silence and looked over the fence because it was too dark to see anything from my window. I noticed a black rubbish bag protruding from the ground at the bottom of the pit under the moonlight. I became motionless. I had no idea what to do. I considered approaching to investigate, but I became afraid. Charles came back outside a few minutes later, so it's a good thing I hurried back inside. But this time, he refrained from digging. He moved to the side of his house and took a moment to vanish. When I looked outside first thing next morning, the hole was fully filled in, as if nothing had ever happened. But suddenly his SUV was not parked in the driveway. It was parked on the street. I could not get that black bag out of my head. Was that the body of his son? It's all I can think of. I don't know. Charles hasn't been around me since. I never got the shovel back from him, and I noticed him peering out of his house through my window yesterday. He closed his shades as soon as he saw I was watching. Not even my wife has heard about this from me yet. To be honest though, I have no idea what to do next. I'm terrified to death. My family moved into our first home when I was 15. I never really got to know the neighbors in the 15 years that we lived there. We hardly ever spoke to the two boys who lived next door, Eric and Todd, who were raised by their father. It was weird, but at least we knew who they were by name. Todd stopped by to chat with my younger brother and me one day while we were playing basketball outside. I spoke most of the time when he questioned if it was true that we were moving. After our talk, Todd, who appeared to be my age, invited my brother and I to go shoot BB guns. The next day, he and his brother and I sat by the river. I said yes because I had nothing else to do, and my brother inquired about joining us as well. Todd nodded and walked out. Todd and Eric arrived at our place just before dusk the following day. They carried a duffel bag and were clothed in camouflage. It was odd from the beginning. My brother and I looked at each other, trying not to chuckle at how seriously they were taking this. We scarcely spoke as we made our way down to the woods. Todd let go of the bag and produced some firearms when we arrived at the location beside the river. When he handed them to us, he revealed to us that they were genuine weapons rather than just BB guns. At first, I assumed he was kidding, But then Eric pulled a loaded rifle from the bag and began firing at trees on the other side of the river. I recognized then that these were real firearms and that they meant business. I experienced both shock and terror. I took my brother's gun and put it back in the bag, informing Todd and Eric that we had no interest in becoming involved in this. One of them cursed at us as we turned to leave, but we didn't stop. My brother was told to stop talking to them by me. We mentioned the lad's strange behavior to our parents that evening at supper, but we left the firearms out. All we wanted to do was go on. However, an even worse incident occurred that evening. My bedroom window was open when I noticed I was awakened by a chilly air. Before I could react, I heard someone whisper "she" and felt something press up against the back of my head. I tried not to panic and stayed motionless. Todd was the one with the gun to my head. He threatened to kill me and my entire family if I ever informed anyone about the firearms or the trip to the woods. I managed to remain composed despite my fear. I nodded silently, and he pressed the rifle on my head before clambering out the window. After that, virtually every night, I would catch Todd or Eric peering through their house's windows at us. The closer we got to moving, the stranger their conduct became. Someone threw a rock at my window late one night, a week before we moved. Todd was standing there carrying a gun at me once more when I turned to look outside. I believed I was going to die, but before I knew it, they were laughing and calling me derogatory names. That week saw a few more incidents, but fortunately, we switched shortly after. Not even my parents knew what had happened to me. I'm simply relieved we left there at the appropriate time because looking back, I know those boys were hazardous. Something very strange happened 2 weeks ago. Although I don't like my neighbors, I have to live in an inexpensive region for the time being. There are neighbors on one side that play loud music all the time. A younger woman with serious mental health concerns and an older woman in her 60s are on the opposite side. Although I'm not familiar with their relationship, they both seem incredibly odd and scary. The younger woman frequently screams, rocks back and forth, and mumbles to herself during her noisy outbursts. She would occasionally even gesture at me while mumbling, which unnerved me. I would generally go back inside to avoid the weirdness when she had these moments. I once had to go to bed early since I had work the next day. However, my neighbors were really noisy. The elder woman was yelling back at the younger woman, who was having one of her freakouts and screaming. After about an hour of this, I simply lost my patience. I made the decision to approach them and request that they keep it down. The older woman entered the door when I knocked. With a snide expression, she questioned, "What do you want?" I requested them to please turn down the volume. She raised her eyebrows in frustration and shot me a harsh glare. The younger woman then barged into the room and began yelling, "How dare you?" over and over. She came for me, and the older woman had to hold her back before she slammed the door in my face. Though I didn't think I did anything, at least they stopped talking. I returned to my bed and fell asleep. After a few hours, I startled to wakefulness. I felt as though I had hardly slept at 3 in the morning. I tried to go back to sleep after thinking I heard something coming from downstairs, but when it didn't happen again, I dismissed my suspicions as paranoia. Shortly afterward, I awoke once more. Something didn't feel right this time, and suddenly there was a sound. I reached for my phone in a hurry to utilize its light, but I hadn't turned it on yet. I scanned my dimly lit room, attempting to make out anything out of the ordinary. I noticed something murky and dark at the edge of my bed at that point. I got scared when I saw the light on my phone. Crouching at the edge of my bed was the woman who lived next door, but she was younger. Like a feral beast, she let out a loud cry, and I let out a cry too. I sprung from my bed and sprinted towards the door, stumbling along the way. I stammered to my feet, slamming the bedroom door behind me, and she raced after me. I locked the upstairs door after sprinting downstairs. While she beat on the door and screamed stuff I couldn't understand, I promptly contacted the cops. I told the police about the woman who lived next door when they came. The younger woman's mother also emerged, pleading with the cops to leave her alone. But they said they had to check the younger woman in for the night. When an officer asked if I wanted to file charges, the older woman gave me a cold, angry look. Uncomfortable, I chose not to file a complaint. I watched the older woman get into her car and drive off after the police left. The two women still reside next door, and I'm thinking of moving out. It's obvious now that the younger woman is dangerous, and the elder woman despises me. Living here is no longer a safe feeling for me.